Hey friends, welcome back to the Bald Booktuber. My name is Scott. The calendar has flipped yet again, and it is time for yet another monthly wrap-up for the month of February. I do want to start off with a very special birthday wish. Today, my niece turns 3. Addie, I love you so much. Happy birthday. Please quit getting so big. That is not good. You're getting too big for your uncle. But I love you. I hope you're having a wonderful day. In February, I read 6 books. 3 of them were rereads of things that I love already. 3 of them were new reads that I quite enjoyed. For Book of the Month, I never consider rereads, so obviously one of the 3 new books will be the Book of the Month. We'll get to that when we get to that. I will go in order from what I enjoyed the least to what I enjoyed the most, but I liked everything. So there were no clunkers, everything was good, and let's get to it. I applied for and received an advanced reader copy for the 4 workarounds. I did this on audio. This is by Paolo Savaget and read by Roger Wayne. It's a nonfiction book about 4 different types of workarounds that various individuals and organizations have used over time. I quite enjoyed this. This was a really good insight into ways that you can ethically and legally kind of go around established convention in order to get things done. And it was quite well written. I have the full review out on NetGalley and on Goodreads, so you can have a better idea of what you're getting yourself into, but it is something I would recommend. I did give this 4 Stanley nods. I did think that the audio narration by Roger Wayne was quite good. Next up, in terms of enjoyment, I did a reread of Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is, of course, book 2 in the Red Rising saga, the initial trilogy. This is read by Tim Gerard Reynolds, the wonderful Tim Gerard Reynolds, who I love as a narrator, and I think he does an especially good job with this series. I probably like it a tiny bit less than most Red Rising fans. I do certainly enjoy it. I think we get a lot of character growth for Darrow. Severo has some very intriguing stuff going down. Mustang has her character fleshed out quite nice. And we get an introduction to Ragnar, who is my favorite character in that initial trilogy, so that is good to see as well. I think just in terms of personal preference, I really don't like first-person present tense as a storytelling device. This and Project Hail Mary are the only 2 stories that I actually even like when it comes to present tense. I want to be told what happened, not what is happening. It's just always jarring to me. So that, for better or for worse, hurts my enjoyment of these types of stories. That type of kind of immediacy, and you're supposed to be like riding shotgun with the main character. I don't vibe with that. I don't like that very much. I do like a lot of what's going on in Golden Sun. I do like that we hear more about the razor weapons, which is super cool. I like the Iron Rain. That stuff is all very cool. The twist at the end is diabolical, and one of the best things about, obviously, the entire story. That last 5 pages is ridiculous. So I really do love this book. For me, it's not an all-time favorite. It's something that I really enjoy and like going back to. 4 Stanley nods, very good book. I know that, at least in my memory, I enjoyed Morningstar the most of the trilogy, so I'm looking forward to that in March. Next up, we've got Enemy of God. This is book 2 of the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell, read by Jonathan Keeble, who's fantastic. I really enjoyed this. I thought that The Winter King was very good. I thought this was a level up considerably. It starts off with stuff that I really enjoyed, with a lot of Merlin and magic and quest type of stuff. So I like all of that. I thought Arthur's character was fantastic in this book. I even really start to enjoy Derval as a character. And obviously he narrates the series. him looking retrospectively back on the tale. And in the first book, I didn't necessarily understand why he was the choice, but I really start to sympathize with him as a character in this book. I don't think the book, again, is going to be an all-time favorite for me necessarily. It is something that I will certainly revisit. I do really enjoy it. Easily 4 Stanley nods. Quite a good book. Really enjoying the series, and I'm quite certain that Excalibur is going to be very good as well to end things off. But just in terms of being able to say this is one of the best things I've ever read, I wouldn't say that right now, which is not a knock on the book. Just for me, I like other stuff more. Next up, from an enjoyment level, and this actually is going to be book of the month for me. Usually I put that as the last thing that I talk about, but I enjoyed 2 of my rereads more than this book. So Claw of the Conciliator. This is book 2 of Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. This is the second month in a row where a Book of the New Sun entry has been book of the month. I'm having a fantastic time with this series, even when I am always confused reading it. I have very much enjoyed my discussions with Rockio, who is helping me along, because I definitely need to be helped along. So it is the type of series where you can appreciate it on various levels. There is sort of the surface level where you are just following a straightforward story that's in some ways a bit of quest science fantasy. In some ways it's just sort of a retrospective tale of one man's life. You can appreciate it on a symbolic level and looking at different types of religious allegory and those kinds of things. You can appreciate it in terms of historical and philosophical context. So there's a lot there, and it can be mined pretty deeply or at a pretty shallow level and still enjoyed. I won't say too much more about it because I do have the video up with Rockio where we delve into it a little bit more deeply, but I will say I had a fantastic time. I have already started Sword of the Lictor. I'm not super far into it, but of the pages I've read, it seems to be easier to follow so far. Famous last words. But I haven't been confused yet. Claw of the Conciliator, I was confused a lot. And so we'll see how the rest of Sword goes, but I am so happy that I have decided to read this year, and I couldn't be happier that Rockio is tagging along with me to help me figure out what it is that's going on. The narration for the Book of the New Sun is done by Jonathan Davis, who is absolutely fantastic. I don't know if there could have been a more perfect match for this series. He is outstanding, and I've loved immersively reading these books so far. All right, next up we have Golden Fool by Queen Robin Hobb, my favorite author of all time. This is book 2 of The Tawny Man, one of my favorite trilogies of all time, part of Realm of the Elderlings, again, one of my favorite overarching series of all time. A lot of all time in here. I know that others didn't love Golden Fool all that much. They felt like it was middle book syndrome. Mike from Mike's Book Reviews famously says it's his 7th favorite of the 8 that he's read so far, and he didn't like Assassin's Quest at all, so that doesn't say a whole lot for it. But I will say that I love Golden Fool. I think that all of the stuff with building up Dutiful's coterie is fantastic. I love that we get perspectives from members of Witted community as Kettricken brings them in and essentially offers them a sort of political asylum, which I think all that stuff is very, very cool. We get to meet various leaders within the Witted community, which I think is fantastic, and the various ways that they grapple with how they have been essentially abused by the Farseer family over time, and what does the way forward look like. I think that all that stuff's great. Obviously we have the fallout from what happened in Fool's Errand, which I won't say for spoiler reasons, but we have the various characters dealing with what happened there. I think it's a fantastic book. I love it. 5 Stanley nods with no hesitation whatsoever. I think that I wasn't sure if I would love it as much on this reread. I probably love it more, knowing where some of these characters go afterwards and into the final series, Fitz and the Fool. So not everyone is going to love it as much as me. It certainly is not action-packed, that is for certain. But I don't need a book to be action-packed, and I don't read Hobb for the action or necessarily for the plot in any case. I read her because I think she writes character better than anybody else on the planet. I think that she writes things like political intrigue quite well. The character dynamics and relationships are as good or better as any other author on this planet. I love it all. So your mileage may vary. For me, it's about as good as it gets. Golden Fool and all of Tawny Man is narrated by the wonderful James Langton, one of my very favorite narrators. He's absolutely fantastic. He does a great job with this series. I don't love all the ways he pronounces names. That's just a personal preference. I like the way that Paul Bamer in the initial Farseer series pronounces things like Burrich and Ketrican, and maybe Langton pronounces them correctly or the preferred way, but he says Burrick and Ketrican, and I don't know. I don't like that, but I like his narration in general. All right, and then of course this would be book of the month if I considered rereads, but I don't. I leave book of the month to first time reads. This is my 6th time reading it. It's my favorite series of all time. It's one of my favorite books in that series. Obviously, A Clash of Kings, George R.R. Martin. I would say it doesn't get better than this, but A Storm of Swords is coming up, and that's the best fantasy book ever written. But Clash of Kings has some absolutely phenomenal stuff in it. We get all of the stuff with Tyrion taking over the handship and basically making his foothold in the capital there, and taking charge of the various different political factions. I love all the scheming. I love all of the scenes with him and Varys, him and Littlefinger, him and Grand Maester Pycelle. All that stuff is absolutely fantastic. I think all the Dany stuff is great, especially all of the prophecy-laden stuff with her in the House of the Undying. I'm talking about some spoiler stuff and saying some words here and some names, but at this point, I think it's pretty much public consciousness, anything to do with A Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. So if I'm spoiling you, I'm sorry, but does not get too much better than this. The narration I'm often asked about. It's done by Roy Dotrice, who was an actor. I won't lie to you, the narration is not particularly good. Dotrice is not a very natural narrator or a very good one. He often mispronounces names and or says names and words differently from one chapter to the next. He has a tough time with giving people a voice that they would have. Dany sometimes as a 19-year-old woman sounds like an 85-year-old man, that kind of stuff. That just happens. It's not great, but I've listened to it so many times that I forgive Roy and, R.I.P. buddy. But I will continue to listen to those audiobooks as I read the books. I enjoy the immersive experience, and I don't mind Roy. He's just fine. All right, so I read 6 books, which is 1 less than January, but there's 3 less days in February, obviously, than January, so I'm not too worried about that. I did 3,068 pages. The total of the books I read was 3,169, but Golden Sun actually bled into the first day of March. So there was about 100 pages that I took off of that total because I read them in March versus in February. The average page count per book is 528, which is pretty typical for me. Usually the average of 500 or more is pretty typical. My average rating was 4.5. Again, as I told my friend Jack the other day, it's easy to enjoy what you're reading when you stack the deck and you have a ton of rereads of books that you absolutely love. So that definitely helps. And I averaged about 110 pages per day, which, again, significantly less than in January when it was 121. I had various distractions in February that kept me from reading more. I watched a ton of television, which is not something I typically do. Uh, Baseball spring training started, so I've been following that semi closely. My Chicago Cubs, my beloved and often me being unhappy with them, Chicago Cubs, have started 3-4 in spring training play, which doesn't count for anything other than to make me happy or upset depending on the outcome. So hopefully they will have a reasonable season. I don't have super high hopes, but um, I'm not the biggest optimist when it comes to the Cubs, having witnessed many, many terrible seasons. In terms of channel news, I do want to thank all of the subscribers. We did pass 800 subscribers in the month of February, which is outstanding, much further along than I thought it would be at this point. I'm very, very grateful for all of the support. If you are checking me out for the first time, I would love a subscribe from you if you're enjoying what you see. And until next time, publication order always, my friends.